So, what if I told you that some of your most cherished memories might not be entirely true? Today, we're jumping into the really fascinating tension between what we remember and what actually happened. We're talking about the fundamental clash between personal memory and formal history.
You've totally been there, right? Arguing with a sibling about some random childhood memory, and you're both absolutely 100% convinced that your version is the truth. That feeling, that certainty, that's exactly what we're digging into today.
And just so you know, all the core ideas we're exploring here are drawn from a fantastic lesson by the Flying Wings online school.
Okay, first up, memory. We like to think of our memories as these perfect little video recordings that we can just play back anytime we want. But the truth is, oh, it's so much more complex. And honestly, way more interesting than that. At its core, memory is simply our recollection of the past. It's the story we tell ourselves about what happened, whether that's a personal story or a shared story inside a family or a whole community. And this is where we see what memory is really made of. It isn't some factual report. It's deeply emotional. It's selective. I mean, we hang on to the big highlights and the major low points, but all the boring, mundane bits, they just kind of fade away. And of course, it's subjective, constantly being shaped by our feelings, our culture, and even the social pressure around us. Our memory is a living, breathing story, not some fixed record set in stone. All right, so that's memory. Now let's flip to the other side of the coin, history. If memory is a personal story, then you can think of history as a rigorous investigation. It's an active, disciplined process. See, unlike memory, which runs on feelings, history has to rely on evidence, things like documents, artifacts, records. It demands critical analysis, and it requires us to go out and find multiple perspectives, not just stick with our own. The goal of history isn't just to remember, it's to question, to verify, and ultimately to explain the past as objectively as we possibly can. So here it is, the core difference, in a nutshell. Memory is emotional and subjective. History is evidence-based and analytical. Memory picks and chooses what it wants to keep. History tries its best to consider all the evidence from as many different angles as possible. And that leads to a really crucial distinction. This powerful little phrase right here. Memory remembers, history investigates. One is passive, right? It's just a recollection. The other is active. It's a search for a deeper understanding. Okay, so memory is a bit fuzzy, history is rigorous. Got it. But why does this actually matter in the real world? Well, it turns out the stakes are incredibly high. This stuff affects everything from our personal beliefs all the way up to our national identity. You see, when we rely only on our unexamined memories, on those stories we've just always told ourselves without ever really questioning them, we start to create myths. Myths about our families, our communities, our heroes, you know the kind. Stories that feel true, but aren't really backed by any evidence. And what's worse, it can strengthen stereotypes. If our collective memory of another group is based only on selective, biased stories, it just hardens prejudice and makes it worse. And maybe most dangerously, it lets us ignore uncomfortable truths. Memory is fantastic at editing out the parts of our past that challenge how we see ourselves. History, when it's done right, forces us to look right at them. This brings us to a really crucial point. Both memory and history are incredibly powerful forces in shaping who we are. They are quite literally the building blocks of our identity. I mean, our identity is really our sense of self. It's the answer to those huge questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? And it's built from stories that come directly from the past. The historical narratives we learn are just fundamental to who we are. They give us our shared stories, our national heroes, our reasons for cultural pride. They also explain our struggles and help us celebrate our resilience. These stories tell us what our group values and where we fit in the wider world. Here's a perfect personal example. Your family might have a cherished, emotional story about the day you were born, full of funny, selective details. That's memory. But the official birth record tucked away in a file somewhere, that's the historical document. It has the cold, hard, verifiable data. Both are part of your story, for sure, but they serve very different purposes. And what happens on a personal level also happens on a huge national scale. The exact same event, say a border conflict, can be framed as a heroic defense of our homeland by one country and an act of unprovoked aggression by the other. Each narrative is carefully built to strengthen a very specific national identity. This leads to a really modern problem, doesn't it? When a story or a video goes viral, it instantly creates this powerful shared experience. But what is that really? Is it collective memory, based on pure emotion and rapid-fire sharing? Or is it history, based on verification and context? The lines are getting blurrier every single day. All of this points to a critical takeaway. We have to be really wary of where our historical stories come from. There is a real danger in just accepting a single, simplified version of the past. A single story usually gets created when complex events are just flattened into a simple good guys versus bad guys tale. Then, that simple story gets politicized. It's used to justify some current political goal. And finally, to maintain that story, any voices or any evidence that might challenge it are either ignored or silenced. And that's how exclusion and misunderstanding are born. The antidote to this is what good history is all about. It's not about finding one single perfect truth. It's about embracing complexity, actively seeking out multiple perspectives, and creating a space for respectful dialogue, even when, and especially when, it's difficult. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What are the stories that have shaped your identity, your families, your communities, your nations? And maybe more importantly, whose voices might be missing from that narrative? Because that's where the real investigation begins.